Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Breber and alongside me is Logan Camden. And today we are going to be giving out our final NFL award picks. We've got full playoff previews coming in a couple days. But first, we got to wrap this up and give out our award picks. So Logan, I say let's start with the big one. Let's get it out of the way. It's been just a joyful, positive MVP discourse this year, hasn't it? Between Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. I'm ready for this entire discussion to just be over with. Who is your MVP?
Yeah, it's been exhausting. It has been anything but civil. It seemed very tribalistic throughout this entire season. Pick your side and go to war.
And very stupid, I will say, on both sides. The majority of what I've seen has been totally disingenuous, diminishing of the other guy's case.
And bad
which just
faith
sucks when both of them
arguments,
have
bruh.
phenomenal cases. Yeah. Incredible seasons.
Well, also
really
just
one of the best MVP races we've seen, and it's just turned into a mudslinging fest.
ever, man. I mean, there were three guys that legitimately in almost any other year, it feels like they would have won MVP. If it's Allen, if it's Lamar, if it's Joe Burrow. So, on a positive note, they're three of the greatest QB seasons ever. They're three of the highest QB peaks, I think, potentially of all time. And all said and done, because I love all three of these guys. I think three potential top 10 quarterbacks when it's all said and done, potentially.
Wow.
To me, the difference, Josh had the two most signature wins of the season against Detroit and Kansas City. He's the only quarterback in football who beat both of the number one seeds in both of the conferences. Lamar had the best offensive player alongside him between these two guys and Derrick Henry, and I don't think Derrick Henry got nearly enough credit for how he amplified Lamar. Don't get me wrong. Lamar also amplifies Derrick Henry, but Derrick Henry is one of the great running backs this game has ever seen. And I love Lamar Jackson. Please don't think this is me trying to denigrate his case at all. Lamar stat padded against some weak competition, man. Like, Lamar just had some big games against some inferior opponents. Like, everybody, oh my God, look at what he did to the New York Football Giants. Bro, it's the Giants, dog. Chill out. Like, Josh had the two most signature wins of the season. Lamar has the best offensive player alongside him. I think that's the biggest difference to me, man. I'm going to be a little disappointed, I'm not going to lie, if Josh doesn't come away with the MVP, man. I think the two wins against Detroit and Kansas City is what put the nail in the coffin for me.
So I'm going to go ahead and say it's totally unfair to say that Lamar stat padded against anybody. He had a great game against the bad team.
I'm just saying, dude.
That's what you try to do against bad teams.
I'm just saying, like, though it doesn't matter to me if he had a massive get. Like, when people at the end of the year only reason I mention that is because people at the end of the year just put up the raw touchdowns to turnovers and yards, and it's just not that simple.
No, I agree with that. I think that there's context that has to be applied to all of these numbers, 100%. I would just frame it more as when Josh goes out there and has a historic performance against the Lions, or when Josh goes out there and plays a phenomenal game to knock off the Chiefs, yes, I value that more than I do a gaudy statistical performance against a team like the Giants, but that's not at all to say that, like, that's what Lamar's season is, beating up on bad teams. They faced a ton of playoff teams this year, and with just a couple of exceptions, Lamar was amazing, and there were a couple of clunkers for Josh this year too, but Lamar has the better statistical case. He has all year. I mean, it is overwhelming what he has done in terms of numbers. He led the league in passing yards per attempt. He became the first player ever with a 4,000 passing yard, 900 rushing yard season. He had, I believe, the second highest passer rating that we've ever seen. It was incredible. It's an incredible season from Lamar, and if he's your MVP, I have zero issue with it. And honestly, Logan, I was hoping that you were going to take Lamar as your MVP so we could have split opinions and we could really have that debate here. I am going with Josh, though, and I do think that when you try to distill this entire race down to just like a stat graphic, which shows passing yards, rushing yards, passing touchdowns, total touchdowns, interceptions, you miss a lot of what Josh has done at an incredibly high level this year. Like, none of those are going to reflect how incredible Josh has been at limiting negative plays. I mean, he's been historically great at that, which always has been the biggest knock on Josh, right? Too many turnovers. Well, this year, he had the fewest negative plays, that is including turnovers and sacks, ever by a quarterback to attempt 450 passes in a season. He had 10 fewer total negative plays than Lamar Jackson. He also became the first player ever with 40 plus total touchdowns, 8 turnovers or fewer, and under 20 sacks in a season. And he took just 14 sacks this year, which I do think it's underrated that Josh is right up there for the best dude we've ever seen in terms of sack evasion right now. He and Lamar got pressured at identical rates, both about 32% of the time, and Josh took just over half the sacks that Lamar did, or about 60% of the sacks, but significantly fewer, which is incredibly impressive. And in games that Josh actually played in this year, he led one of just 5 offenses this century to average 3 points per drive. That's another thing that doesn't show up when you just compare these two dudes' raw, conventional stats on a stat graphic. And I like the Bills supporting cast that he led to do that. In fact, I told everyone before the year, Logan, that this was going to be a top 5 offense because that's what Josh does every year, but also because I thought people overestimated the loss of Diggs. They certainly overestimated the loss of Gabe Davis, and I liked some of the talent in this room. I liked the depth specifically, which, by the way, very much made me the odd man out because there were a bunch of people who were out on the Bills, who were out in the offense, who said this was going to be the year that Josh and Buffalo got exposed, et cetera, et cetera. And the one thing I do want to say is it's totally good with me if Lamar is your MVP, but people do need to take accountability for what they said because either Josh is significantly better than they thought, or the supporting cast, which, by the way, has been banged up throughout the year, is significantly better than they thought. I honestly think it's a combination of both, but I've kind of seen a lot of people just skip straight from preseason saying, oh, the Bills are going to win 9 games, they fall off, just to now the Bills won 13 games, but they're adamantly arguing that Josh Allen isn't the MVP. Like, I think there needs to be some recognition that a lot of people were just totally wrong about that.
He's the most overrated player in the sport, man.
That's what the people said. But again, even though I do like the supporting cast, you compare it to every other offense in that 3 points per drive club. It's the 2007 Pats, who had Tom Brady at his best, Randy Moss at his best, Wes Welker, stacked offense. The 2018 Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, the best quarterback in football, and arguably, 2 of the 4 best receiving weapons in football with both Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. It's those two. It's AB. It's Julio. Nobody else at that time was as lethal in the sport. They had 2 of the big 4 on one team. The 2020 Packers, Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, an elite running back in Aaron Jones. The Lions this year, which is one of the most completely stacked offenses we've ever seen because that line in and of itself is a superstar unit. And then you have Jahmyr Gibbs, who's a top 3 running back. You have Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's probably a top 5 receiver. You have Jamison Williams, who's one of the best number 2 receivers in football, right? The group that Buffalo has, although I think it's a good line, although I think that it's a solid group of receivers, does not compare in terms of star value to any of those other teams. It's not even close. We've never seen an offense this great with this few stars, with Keon and Kincaid missing multiple games, with Amari Cooper only playing 8 games, with Khalil Shakir as your number 1 receiver. Josh led them to that. And you mentioned the raw production point, and I think that's kind of really the crux of this debate in a lot of ways, or that's how a lot of people are trying to frame it. And I just think, again, that misses context, not just in terms of what I just talked about, where it misses the team success that Josh propelled them to offensively, where it misses on this historic ability to limit negative plays, which is such a great thing for an offense. It also just doesn't account for how much football Josh did not play this year because the Bills were blowing their opponent out or because he sat out an entire game in week 18. And I've seen a lot of people get mad at me for adjusting their numbers to if they had played the same number of snaps, Josh and Lamar. And I understand that's not perfect, right? Because at the end of the day, Josh played fewer snaps. He did not actually play the extra 100 and something snaps of football to project out his numbers and say, oh, this is exactly what he would have done.
That matters, though. I think that's very important.
Exactly. It's not perfect, but I think it is so much more accurate than giving Lamar the raw statistical edge in a vacuum and not acknowledging how much more football he played. If you do make that adjustment, if we just on a per snap basis project Josh's numbers out to the number of snaps that Lamar played, Josh would have 4,659 total yards. Lamar would have 4,938. Josh would have 45 touchdowns. Lamar would have 45 touchdowns. So Lamar still has the raw yardage advantage, but it's much less significant. The touchdowns are the same, And I do think it's important to make some sort of adjustment. And I've also seen people saying, oh, well, Josh was sitting out snaps because he was getting crushed by the Ravens. That was 8 snaps the entire year. So if you want to take out those 8 snaps for the adjustment, that's fine by me. I just think the fundamental point is it matters that Josh led such a successful team that he wasn't on the field for a lot of these stretches. And in games he played, Josh also accounted for more of Buffalo's yardage than Lamar did for the Ravens. 72% for Josh, 68% for Lamar. This is including sack yardage lost, and the Bills were the more successful offense. They put up more points. They put up more points per drive. So when we do adjust the raw numbers to say, okay, if they had played the same amount of football this year, and you see it's pretty damn close, and then I tell you that Josh had far fewer negative plays, that he comfortably led the NFL in total EPA, expected points added. Even missing the last game, he still comfortably led Lamar there. He led the better scoring offense with less help. I think some Bills fans have made totally disingenuous arguments about the Ravens receiving core and just pointing at the fact that they lead the league in separation and saying, oh, well, that is a testament to how good those guys are. No, that's really much more a testament to the backfield that you have with Lamar and Derrick Henry and how much terror they strike into every single defense in terms of how much they need to be ready to play the run. Yes, that is going to free up open receivers, as will Lamar's incredible scrambling ability. Like, that is dumb. The Ravens certainly do not have a stacked receiving core, but they have a very solid receiving core, I would say pretty comparable to the Bills, and they have Derrick Henry. And Derrick Henry is a mega weapon, and I do think that that matters at least a bit. And Josh did beat the number 1 seeds in both conferences. That does matter to me considering how well he played in those games. And he led Buffalo to a 13-3 record, and he did this all in the year that everyone declared the Bills were going to be rebuilding, and they were laughing about the supporting cast. So I just don't see how you can't at least see the case. If you prefer the volume with Lamar, and the efficiency is also incredible with Lamar, I get it. But if you don't see what an incredible stabilizing force Josh was, still doing all this incredible stuff, creating out of structure, right? Elevating everybody around him while taking incredible care of the football. The Bills had the fewest turnovers of any team in NFL history this year, Logan. And we always jump to turnovers. We always jump to negative plays in the MVP race when it's working against Josh. Now that Josh is the best in football at limiting those negative plays this year, all of a sudden, it's not a relevant talking point. I just think people are being unfair, and I think some people are being willfully blind, and that applies to both sides of this debate, which just really, truly has been awful. But they're 2 incredible candidates. To me, Josh embodied what an MVP should be with what he did situationally, with what he did lifting this supporting cast to be a historic offense. I mean, that's incredible that this was a historic scoring offense when you look at the talent they had on the field.
Carson likes him because it's the white guy. You know, I mean, that's why he's
Whoa!
backing him.
Whoa! There's something about Flacco, man.
The only thing I wanted to add on that is I think it's a perception thing, Carson, and I don't think it's unique to Josh Allen. I don't think it's exclusive to Josh Allen. I think when you play any sport, if it's basketball, if it's football, whatever it is, the narrative and perception of whatever it is about you takes over. And the perception of Josh Allen for a very long time has been that he is mistake-prone, he is turnover-prone, he is a loser in the playoffs. And it's sad because it seems like those 3 things always come before anything else with Josh Allen, before he gets any credit for being one of the great offensive engines in NFL history at the quarterback position. I truly believe that. And that's why I had Josh Allen as my 4th best quarterback of all time. And let me tell you, he's not done moving up on that list. I could see Josh ending as high as top 3, as number 1 maybe. You know, Josh has a lot of things to check off of his box before that's stamped, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. But that's what I think we saw this year, Carson. I think a lot of people had dug their heels into what they thought about Josh Allen and their takes about Josh Allen as him being mistake-prone, turnover-prone, being overrated. You know, guys taking Tua over Josh, taking Brock Purdy over Josh Allen, right? I think a lot of people dug their heels into what their take was about Josh Allen, and it's hard for them to walk it back. And I think for people who are tapped in, have known what Josh Allen is and was, and have realized how much better he has gotten. And I think Lamar has a great case at winning MVP. To be completely honest, I think this is the best year of Lamar's career. And so a lot of people, because in roundabout thinking, they go, well, if Lamar's already a two-time MVP and this is his best year ever, he should win his third MVP. Well, in a lot of years, that would be true. It just so happens this year that I think Josh Allen had a better year than Lamar Jackson, and that's that. So that's just my thing, man. I think it's a lot of perception and a lot of monkeys that it's hard to get off your back, man. When you've got that on your back for Steve Young for so long, he ain't got a Super Bowl. You can never be as great as Joe Montana. When he won that Super Bowl, you got that iconic clip of him. Get that monkey off my back. I hope that MVP will get it off of Josh's back, man, because I think he deserves it, and I am going to be a little disappointed if he doesn't win it, man.
Honestly, can I tell you something?
You don't think he's going to get it?
I don't care at all if he wins
Really?
it. No, I do think he's going to get it. And that's also why I definitely do not want this to come across as a bitch and moan about how nobody appreciates Josh Allen and he's such a victim of the media and the perception, because I think he's going to win MVP. And I think that Lamar is a phenomenal case, and I understand if Ravens fans are pissed if he doesn't get it, just as I would understand Bills fans being pissed if Josh doesn't get it. I do think that he's going to win, and the reason I don't care is I think all that's going to matter at the end of the day is how these guys perform in the playoffs in terms of the perception of what this race came down to. Because whoever does win is going to have to back it up. And I do think it's going to be Josh. I think he's going to be the one who has that pressure to back it up. And that also means a lot more ire is going to come your way if you don't back it up and you don't play your best football in the playoffs. So I think that Josh deserves it. But I also think that Lamar deserves it. It's just unfortunately we can only give it to the one guy. And to me, it is Josh who deserves it the most. Okay, so you would have Burrow 3. I think Burrow is a very clear 3. The one thing I will say with him, I think that Josh and Lamar both win MVP with the seasons that they've had in 90+% of years. Burrow, as incredible as he's been, I still think would be dealing with the team success argument. Like, no quarterback has ever won MVP in a 9-win season when it was an actual full 16+ game season.
It reminds me of Chris Johnson's case in 2009 when Peyton had a very average year by his standards, and yet the Titans win 9 games, and he's the best player in football. But it just never happens.
It doesn't happen, and I think that is flawed, because Joe Burrow does not play defense. None of these guys play defense, and all of their defenses have let them down at various points this year. At the same time, I still think that Josh and Lamar are both greater individual forces, and they still both manage to lead out better team offenses.
Completely agree.
They're just different sort of one-man engines. Burrow is just about as good as a pocket passer can be, and he can move, but obviously he doesn't move and create like Josh and Lamar do. And I will say, if you ever gave those guys, Jamar and T. Higgins, good God. Obviously, Joe has had his issues with the line in front of him, but it's just an unbelievable thing to have as a quarterback. Do you want to round out the top 5? I mean, just what would your full ballot be?
I guess next I would go Saquon, and then maybe Jamar Chase. No, I don't know. I'd probably have. You know what? I'd give it to Goff. I'd probably give my 5th spot to Goff. And the only reason, I mean, I think offensive player of the year is probably, more for skill position guys. So there's some other guys that I'll shout there, but
yeah.
Or, a guy that would be in my top 10 for sure is Jaden Daniels, actually, man. I think I would with the team success that he had. But I would go, I think, Saquon and then Goff to round out my 5.
I think that I would go Mahomes and Jaden to round out my top 5.
I saw a lot of chatter online, people talking about seeing Carson Wentz with the Chiefs, and then they go, man, maybe I took Mahomes for granted a little bit.
Like, it's obviously not a shiny statistical season. It's not good enough for him to be in these top-tier talks. He made too many mistakes, and he just didn't have, like, an earth-shattering season like Lamar or Josh or even a Joe did.
Mahomes' standards are so high.
So high. But that's part of the reason that I think a subpar Mahomes season, the worst regular season that he's had in some time, although last year also wasn't great, still can be argued as a top 5 MVP ballot worthy season, because also, like, the execution was unbelievable. They were the best third down offense in football all year. He led 7 game-winning drives, 4 fourth-quarter comebacks, and you can say, oh, well, they were in some games that they shouldn't have been in. Okay, but nobody was better all year at putting together a big drive when you needed it, and that's what Mahomes did. So it's not enough for him to, like, have an MVP case, but in 4, I'm good with him. And then Jaden took an offense that was 24th in points per drive last year and got them up to 4th.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just towards every efficiency metric, towards the top of the league. One of the best rookie quarterback seasons we've ever seen, inarguably, if not the best. I personally think it is the best. So he has another award that he'll get, but this is no hate to Saquon. It's just running backs, man. Like, the Eagles were 7th in points per drive last year. They add Saquon. They're 7th in points per drive this year. 2 years ago, they were 3rd in points per drive. Like, the production is incredible. I just don't think any one running back can compare to the value of a really great quarterback season. And that is ultimately what I'm considering for my MVP voting. It's the most wonderful time of the year for getting in on all the hoops, football, and hockey action at DraftKings Sportsbook. In the season of giving, we're being gifted college football and basketball, pro football and basketball, and pro hockey too, almost 24/7.
So many games every day, so many opportunities to place your first bet. Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and place your bet. And here's a gift for all new customers. Bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins.
Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code NERDS. That's code NERDS for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins when you bet just $5. Happy holidays from DraftKings. The crown is yours. Let's talk Offensive Player of the Year, though. Logan, who do you have here?
Yeah, I would give it to Saquon. I think it's a really interesting race, but he no doubt elevated this team massively. I do want to give an honorable mention real quick to Jamar Chase, to Derrick Henry, and to Jahmyr Gibbs. I think all those guys have really good cases at this. And shout out Jahmyr for stepping up in a big way without David Montgomery. I think that Saquon and Henry got a lot of shine this year, and he kind of flew under the radar. But Saquon joins the 2,000 yards in a single season club. He had the 14th most rushing yards per game ever in a single season. And he just opens up an element that Philadelphia didn't have. You know, they had a good running game consistently because of their offensive line, but you think of all the explosive runs. I don't know if he ended up breaking it, but he had at a point in time tied the record for most, I think, 60-yard touchdown runs or something absurd like that in a single year with Jim Brown and Adrian Peterson. And I just think about the mid-2000s when ground attacks were at their absolute apex with the Priest Holmeses, the LaDainian Tomlinses, and the Sean Alexanders. If we were in the mid-2000s, Saquon Barkley would have had 25 rushing touchdowns. Pre-tush push, Saquon had many.
Also, just if he wasn't playing with Jalen Hurts, who is one of the great short yardage rushing quarterbacks we've seen. He's just an absolute tank. I don't know if you heard, but he squats 600 pounds. And with this offensive line.
For a long time, I used to hold it against guys that didn't get into the end zone, and I think it was flawed logic on my part, like holding Megatron's 1,900-yard campaign against him. Well, he's drawing 2 to 3 guys in the red zone every trip down, right? Saquon is getting this team to the 1-yard line, and then they're just putting it over. So I don't hold touchdowns. It's more what he did, and 5.8 yards per carry, over 2,000 yards. I think he was the best offensive player in football. This is no shade at Henry or Jamar or Jahmyr or anything like that. Saquon just had the best year, in my opinion, by any skill position guy, so I think he deserves it.
And he did have 15 touchdowns. I mean, let's not act like this was some slouch.
Well, I'm just saying, he could have had, one of the, pantheon years.
What was the stat? I mean, I know at some point, and this wasn't even
at least
the end
9.
of the regular
It was
season.
at least 9.
Yeah, I want to say week 13, the stat came out that 9 different times he had gotten them down to the 1, and then they came in with the tush push for Jalen Hurts, which is tough for the boy, but he had an incredible season. And it's cool that he ends up just playing in 16 games, so we have a very clean comparison to a lot of these other historic running back seasons. And he ends 13th ever in yards from scrimmage, 8th in rushing yards, 8th in rushing yards per carry ever by a running back in a 1,000-yard season. And by the way, Derrick Henry is slightly higher than him on that list in terms of yards per carry, and Jahmyr Gibbs is in the top 15 too. All these guys, 2 of them are playing behind elite offensive lines, and the other one is playing with the greatest rushing quarterback we've ever seen. So they all have big helps in terms of boosting their efficiency, but nevertheless, incredible. Incredible running backs.
What great running back doesn't, man,
It's really, really, really hard to do without a very good offensive line. This is true. But I am going to go with Saquon. Henry, honorable mention. It's just not quite the same production. Jamar, I thought about Jamar. I did. It's such a dominant receiving season, but just in terms of the historic nature of Saquon's season, I can't really pass that up. But I think that you outlined all the right guys who are in this conversation. If I were to give a nod to a fifth, then it would be Justin Jefferson, just because he's such a monster. How about DPOY, Logan? Who you got?
I'm going to give it to Myles Garrett. I think on...
Whoa!
I know.
Whoa!
I think on a per snap basis, I think Garrett was the best player out of the bunch. And that's why I was glad you mentioned this about Josh Allen and Lamar. You know, Myles Garrett played over 100 snaps less than TJ Watt. And that's also a part of my argument. I considered my top three, and there's so many good defensive players. I think DPOY was the hardest award to choose on this entire list. So many guys had amazing seasons. My ballot would have gone Garrett 1, TJ Watt 2, Trey Hendrickson 3, Andrew Van Ginkel 4, who I really did consider heavily for this award. He had a phenomenal year. Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch both, the safety tandem for Detroit. But I think per snap, I think Garrett was the best player out of the bunch. And I argued last year that Myles Garrett shouldn't have won Defensive Player of the Year for how he sputtered down the stretch. He had 1 sack in the final 7 weeks last year. I think TJ Watt sputtered down the stretch this year. He was just not nearly as impactful as he normally was. In his final 4 games, that losing streak, he had 2 sacks and 1 forced fumble, and he had 0 tackles in the closeout game against Cincinnati. I thought about this a lot of ways. Do I give it to the most impactful defensive player on the best defense? That's why I considered a guy like Van Ginkel or Jonathan Grenard, and I think they have real cases. Do I give it to the guy who had the most overwhelming statistical case? I think that's Trey Hendrickson. He had the most sacks and pressures out of anybody this year. I thought about, do I give it to the best defensive playmaker? And I think that's TJ Watt, who led the NFL in forced fumbles this year. I decided to give it to the best defensive player on a per-snap basis, and I think that was Myles Garrett this year.
Logan, I'm blown away. I mean, I was ready to come in here and just listen to you give your classic TJ monologue for 5 minutes and then get reamed and spanked when I sheepishly told you that I had Myles Garrett. And honestly, I'm kind of disappointed to miss out on that moment. But I do have Myles Garrett. I did think he was the best defensive player in football this year. There was a pretty big gap in terms of pass rushing production and impact between him and TJ. Myles Garrett was third in the NFL in terms of total pressures with 84. TJ had 49.
That's why I was so staunch last year that TJ should have got it, because I just thought you felt his impact. I felt Myles' impact more than you. I feel like when you watched it, you felt it, man.
Yeah. And TJ still had an awesome season, and he would be my runner-up. And he still racks up 19 tackles for loss. He has a league-leading 6 forced fumbles. Of course he does. Like, there's never been a better defensive lineman, edge rusher, in terms of forcing those swing plays, like literally forcing fumbles. TJ Watt is the greatest player, I think, in football history. And he was also great against the run. It's just that gap in terms of pass rushing, like in terms of quick pressures, that's pressures in under 3 seconds. Myles Garrett more than doubled TJ, and he did have 14 sacks, and he's got a higher pass rush win rate while he's double teamed more than twice as much as TJ. I'm not making this case to you anymore because you agree with me. I was prepared to make this to you, but I think TJ probably is going to win this award. At least that's what it seems like. So
I think they got it backwards these last 2 years, man.
There's an argument. I thought Myles deserved it last year, but it was definitely very close. And the thing is, you have the question of, will they reward a great player on a defense that, by like some conventional metrics, like scoring numbers, right, didn't look like the Browns had a good defensive season, but actually the Browns were 3rd in yards allowed per drive and they were 10th in points allowed per drive. They just have like a historically bad offense. Their offense is dead last in yards per drive, dead last in points per drive, and had the 2nd most turnovers in football. So the defense did their job. This was still a playoff caliber defense. It was just a truly horrible offense. And you mentioned Trey Hendrickson. In terms of pure pass rushing, I think he was the best guy in football this year. It's just the gap as a run defender between him and Myles Garrett is big. The gap as a run defender between him and TJ Watt is also big. So I would go Myles Garrett 1. I go TJ 2. And then I'm tempted to go Pat Surtain 3. I think Pat Surtain had a truly unbelievable cornerback season. Only a 55 passer rating when he was targeted. 2 pick sixes, and I just think his ability to be so elite as a coverage corner was really fundamental to Denver being the elite defense that they were and allowed them to be more aggressive up front because they have so much faith in Surtain and their secondary on the back end, but especially Surtain. But I think it's got to go to one of the edges, and I do think it should be Myles Garrett. But I don't think he's going to get it because the Browns just had such a bad year.
It wouldn't shock me. And if they go with that metric, I wouldn't be mad if they give it to Van Ginkel either. And the reason I shout out Van Ginkel is just because of his versatility this season. He wasn't only such a great pass rusher, impactful stopping the run. He was great in coverage. I mean, when they were really battered, they had Van Ginkel running inside linebacker for them when Cashman was out. Like, the versatility, the all-around impact. He also had 2 interceptions, both of which went back for pick sixes.
Yeah.
Van Ginkel had a phenomenal year, and I think he deserves some flowers for this amazing season, too. There were so many great defenders this year.
Yeah, man. Shout out Van Ginkel. He really had a phenomenal season. And shout out Grenard, too. I think that Vikings defense was awesome. Shout out Brian Flores, too, for that. How about Offensive Rookie of the Year, Logan? Who do you like here?
No brainer. I think it's Jaden Daniels.
Yeah.
You mentioned it earlier. I think it is the greatest offensive rookie quarterback season of all time. Number 1 in rushing yards by a rookie quarterback. Number 1 completion percentage. Number 8 total touchdowns per game. Number 10 total yards per game. And number 4 in passer rating. That is all by a rookie quarterback. And he's 9th in rushing yards by a quarterback in a single season all time. This is a guy who stepped in here with a full regime change, took them from the 2nd overall pick to the playoffs, from 4-13 to 12-5. And the biggest component of Jaden Daniels' argument as the best rookie quarterback ever and the rookie of the year, in my opinion, is the overall team offense. 5th scoring offense, 6th third down offense, number 1 fourth down offense, number 6 red zone offense. I think it's the best team offense ever led out by a rookie. Now, I would hear an argument for maybe like the 2016 Cowboys, but again, when we're looking at individual responsibility for why an offense was elite, you look at that Cowboys team, and they have one of the greatest offensive lines I've ever seen.
Yeah.
All pros everywhere. An elite running back in Ezekiel Elliott, like Dak Prescott was steering the ship, right? It would be like saying the 04 Steelers offense was just great because of Big Ben. That's not the case. You can legitimately say that about Washington, and that's why I think not only does Jaden have a legitimate Offensive Rookie of the Year case, he has a legitimate MVP case. And the cherry on top are the classic moments, the game-winning drives, Atlanta in overtime, that comeback game against Philadelphia, the Hail Mary against Chicago. I think it's the greatest rookie quarterback campaign ever, man. Jaden Daniels is the shit.
He totally is. You mentioned all of the ranks among rookie quarterbacks, historic in so many ways. And this is, by the way, in basically 15 and a half games because he sat a good portion of the game this past week, and then he also went out for a good portion of their game against the Ravens. So that's important, right? He's not even getting that 17th game boost. And also situationally, I mean, led the number 6 third down offense, number 1 fourth down offense, number 6 red zone offense. And as I mentioned earlier, took an offense that was in the mid-20s in terms of yards and points per drive last year and got them to be the number 4 scoring offense in football. It's incredible. And I do think that although we can give credit to Kingsbury and we can give credit to Terry McLaurin and whatnot, this was an offensive situation that was ultimately made by Jaden Daniels. They did things to put him in a position to succeed, but without a dude with his sort of unbelievable rushing ability and still having an accurate arm, like, this offense just does not look anything like it did. I thought it was a really, really special campaign. And even though I think Brock Bowers had the best rookie tight end season since Mike Ditka, that's just not enough to match that transformative quarterback impact. Same thing we talk about with MVP. You get a rookie quarterback season like this, that guy's winning Offensive Rookie of the Year. It's like CJ versus Puka last year, right? I thought it was CJ. That's how I feel. That's my philosophy with Offensive Rookie of the Year. How about Defensive Rookie of the Year, Logan?
I'm going to give it to Quinion Mitchell, the guy I picked at the midway point, and a lot of it has to do with his impact on team defense. Under 55% completion percentage allowed on the year. He allowed 41 catches for 472 yards and 3 TDs. It was just transformative, right? That was the biggest hole in Philadelphia's secondary last season. Completely just... they hit that skid, man, and they lost the brakes in their car. I mean, just completely rolled down the hill into a car wreck against Tampa Bay when Baker and them upset them, and that's been a strength of this defense this year. So I thought he had the biggest impact on a team defense and swung that secondary. Shout out Cooper DeJean, too. I thought he was a big part of that. I thought Slay had a good year for Philadelphia, but I think Quinion deserves it, man. And I thought Jared Verse had a good year. I thought he was a little bit single dimension, like one dimensional in terms of just pass rush, but he also missed a lot of tackles, and that's what burned me a little bit about Verse too. But it was close. Both of these guys are really good. I'd give it to Mitchell.
Bro is a Jared Verse hater. I think that he was good against the run, and he does have 11 tackles for loss on the year. B, he's got the low raw sack number. To anybody who is going to look at that and see 4.5 sacks, how could he be Defensive Rookie of the Year? He was 4th in the league in pressures, man. I mean, it is the top dog established superstar pass rushers and Jared Verse up there. His pressures also led to 4 turnovers, which was the second highest mark in the NFL. So Mitchell was really good. Shout out. I don't think he was as elite respective to his position as Verse was. And also, in terms of positional value, I mean, I think Verse is more impactful, just being that level of an edge. So I'm going to give it to him. We'll both stay on our respective sides from the midseason point. How about Coach of the Year, Logan?
I'm going to give it to Dan Campbell. I think the two Coaches of the Year candidates went to battle in this last game that we saw to wrap up the regular season. I think Dan Campbell won it. Dan Campbell and his coaching staff outcoached Kevin O'Connell and his coaching staff, and I was going to give it to whoever won that football game. So I think Dan Campbell earned it. Traditionally, I think this award goes to coaches who overachieved. And in a lot of ways, I do think the Lions overachieved. I mean, with as many injuries as they sustained to stay the course, to have so many guys step up and do their jobs, that is a reflection of coaching. Like, so many teams will crumble like a house of cards when they have to have any backups step in and do their job. They can't do it. I've never seen a defense this banged up and stay so together and seem so well prepared for every single game. Again, I think it normally goes to coaches that are really unexpected, maybe like a Dan Quinn or something like that. That's who I said at the midway point. I think Dan Campbell is the best coach in the league this year. I think he deserves it.
I think that the Lions make a strong case for best coaching staff. I'd probably still go with the Chiefs. If you give me Andy Reid and Spags in a big game, I'll bet on those two guys. But when you consider not just Campbell and who he is as a culture guy and what he does for their philosophy as a football team, what he is as a motivator, then you also have, I think, the best offensive coordinator in football in Ben Johnson and one of the best defensive coordinators in Aaron Glenn. They've got a hell of a coaching staff. And to some extent, I do feel like Coach of the Year is kind of a collective award. I know that they give out Assistant Coach of the Year, but nobody cares about that. Nobody talks about that. However, my expectation before the year was that the Lions would be the 1 seed in the NFC. And I think your expectation before the year was that the Lions would be the 1 seed. At least I'm almost positive that's what I picked. And you have another team in the division whose preseason win total over-under was 6.5, man. And I'm not saying that the Lions didn't run into some unanticipated bumps and bruises because obviously their defense was decimated with injuries. I still think what Kevin O'Connell did with the Vikings is more impressive to me. And I get it. I thought that Dan Campbell did get the best of their battle the other night, and that kind of leaves a sour taste in your mouth maybe with KOC, but it doesn't change the fact that they went 14-3. They more than doubled their preseason win total over-under, and he completely revived Sam Darnold to the point where people had old Sammy Darnold, old see and go Sammy, in MVP conversations. That's incredible. And again, when it comes to sort of viewing this as a collective coaching staff award, to some extent at least, I think Brian Flores did an unbelievable job with this defense. I love their philosophy. I love how much they bring pressure. And they were one of the absolute best groups in football. And I also think that they really got the most out of their offense. I think the play calling was good. I think that it was a very balanced offense. And they just, to me, squeezed every ounce out of their ability on both sides of the ball. Honestly, the guy who I considered more than Dan Campbell, just because it's so hard for me, if I expect you to be great, even if you do overcome some adversity and overachieve a bit, it's just probably not going to compete with like the real surprise success story, especially if you win 14 games as a surprise like Minnesota did. But the guy who I was considering was Sean Payton. I really think Sean Payton did a phenomenal job. And anytime you can get Bo Nix to throw for 30 touchdowns in a season, man, you might just be the GOAT. You might just be the GOAT. And that was not a team I expected at all to see in the playoffs. I thought they'd be one of the worst teams in football. And here they are. They won 10 games. Elite defense. Thought that was a really great job the Broncos coaching staff did in totality, but especially Sean Payton.
I think him, Dan Quinn, and I think Harbaugh deserve some shouts for what he did in Los Angeles too, man.
Yeah, shout out to Harbaugh. Dan Quinn, I do think, was something of a Cliff Kingsbury merchant this year. And
well, I'm just saying, you're talking about unexpected, unexpected
definitely
teams.
unexpected. Definitely unexpected. But I give Cliff and Jaden the majority of the credit for that. But I agree. I think Harbaugh is a great coach. We're talking about old Jim here, of course. And I'm very excited to see what he and Herbert continue to do going forward. Last award, Logan. Comeback Player of the Year. Who you got?
So I'm not really 100% sure what the criteria is going to be. I've heard that you had to be injured. I've also heard that they're not going to do that. If you need the injury requirement, I would say Joe Burrow. If not, I would give it to Sam Darnold. I mean, just when we're talking about expectations, it's like last year when, Joe Flacco won it, right?
Over Damar Hamlin, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would have given it to Damar Hamlin. I thought that was asinine. But if we were going off standard rules last year for this year, I would have given it to Baker Mayfield, like all things considered. He had that classic bounce back. Nobody thought, everybody thought he was cooked, except me. I believed in you, Baker. I didn't believe in you this year. I picked the freaking Falcons to win the division. I feel like a fool, but...
No, you still believed in your baby darling boy.
Yeah, I mean, I had them they were close, but I wish I had picked them to win the division. I think the guy this year is Sam Darnold. I counted Sam Darnold out. I thought they were going to win 7 games. He'd be a bit of a liability to this team. He was anything but a liability this year. He completely outplayed and exceeded all of my expectations. Over 4,000 yards, 35 TDs, 12 picks, 66% completion, and a 102.5 passer rating. I counted Sam Darnold out, and he bounced back in a big way this year. And, yeah, I think he deserves the award.
I agree. I think it would be different if Burrow missed the whole year last year.
Yeah.
It's like
it was week 11 and on.
7 games. You missed 7 games, then it's like, all right, we might as well put Herbert in these conversations. He missed the last 4 games last year. And to me, that's just not what it's about. It's about a full comeback.
And also, who was shocked that Joe Burrow came back and was a great quarterback?
Of course, nobody was shocked. Nobody was shocked at all. So that's the thing. Like, you have to be overcoming the odds in some way, okay? It has to be like a real injury, like what Alex Smith went through, right? Harrowing injury. You come back from that. It doesn't always have to be that dramatic, but at least it should cause you to basically miss a season, and then you come back from that and you prove what you can do again. Burrow had an amazing season. He had the best season of his career, but it's just not there for me in terms of the actual comeback narrative, so I would give it to Sam Darnold. The fact that he had 4,300 plus yards and 35 touchdowns to 12 picks and led a 14-3 team, like, I thought he was going to have the best year of his career. I didn't think that he was going to come close to doing that. And when you consider what his reputation has been, bust, backup in San Francisco, sort of shipped from place to place, from Carolina to the Niners, and then he comes in here and he just has a great season. I don't see how anybody else tops that. It's a weird award, let's be honest. It's kind of like the equivalent of the NBA's Clutch Player of the Year, where I'm like, this is so subjective and narrative based effectively that I don't know if we need to have this one. In some years there is like a super clear candidate, in some years there isn't. In the years that there isn't, I just don't think we need to really have it or make a big deal about it. But I think it's got to be Sammy D's nuts if it's on anybody.
How's it going, bro?
You heard that one before ever? So what I did is I said D's and you're thinking D's what? I said D's nuts.
My favorite is do you know my friend Duma?
Do my balls stink?
How do my balls feel on your chin?
How Duma? That doesn't even work.
How do my balls feel on your chin?
So then that would be, do you know my friend How Duma?
Or no, I mean, or you could just hit him with "Do my nuts fit in your mouth?" like something like that. There's good ones.
You remember that old NBA player Malone White?
Who's Malone White, bro?
Malone White dick in your mouth? All right. Classic. Appreciate you guys. We're going to be back with playoff talk very soon. This is just a little quick one, but I'm really, really excited to go deep into those NBA playoffs. NFL playoffs, I should say. But I'm thinking about the NBA, and I did just make a video about the NBA and Jokic and Wemby dueling just the other day. That was super fun to watch over the weekend, so I did do a deep dive into that on our YouTube channel, where you can find all of our content, video essays, and all of our full shows. You can also listen to the full shows across all audio platforms, and you can follow us across social: TikTok, Instagram at NerdSesh, Twitter at nerd_sesh to see clips from the show, graphics from the show, and all of our short-form trivia content. You can also join our Discord if you want. The link to that is at the link tree across our social media bios. And you can check out our merch if you want. That is also in our link tree and at breakingtea.com. And also, Logan, can we say a happy birthday to the big boss man, Colin Cowherd?
Happy birthday. I mean, dude, he got the best gift of the year. He got Sam Darnold.
They wrapped up Sam Darnold and they presented him to him?
They gave it to him. He has a life-size.
They gave him Sam Darnold? Oh, that's pretty awesome.
I'm pretty sure a Sam Darnold blow-up doll, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, there's no need to get weird about it.
I mean, can I get one of those?
All right, buddy. This is why we got to put a timer on you every time you start to get going.
They did put Darnold on the birthday cake, which did fire me up.
That's sweet. He was very right about that. That's the equivalent of you with Baker. Look at that 2018 draft.
Can I get a blow-up doll of Baker Mayfield? Let me tell you.
Nope.
Let me tell you what, man. I'm going to run Spider 2Y Banana.
I should hope that you're just running plays.
Dude, we're running a full offense. Juju's going to be at halfback. I'm at fullback, getting into the flat. We'll have Lily run the post route, and I don't know. Baker's going to be quarterback, obviously.
Awesome. Sounds great. All right, guys. Appreciate you. With that, as always, I've been Carson Barber.
I've been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.